excited to talk about accessibility. I'm excited. I hope you are too. This is fantastic. So thanks, Catherine, for the warm welcome. I am super excited to be here. I'm joining you today. Normally, I live in Toronto, Canada. So I came all this way to talk to you about accessible design, and specifically in the concept of design systems. So a little bit about me firstly. I am a human factors engineer. So I'm an industrial engineer, which is like systems engineering, process, logic, a lot of statistics, that kind of thing. And there was a subspecialty around human factors, which is really about understanding people and how we interface with technology. And it's really about designing people first, making sure that we don't conform to the technology, but rather that the technology conforms to us. And that led to a career being a user experience designer. But at some point in my career, I found accessibility, and I just became really passionate about it. And so I have the privilege of being the principal of accessible design at a company called Level Access. We're like the world's largest accessibility-focused company. We help our customers with like manual evaluations of their websites and apps and that kind of thing. But that's very reactive in the process, right? Like, you already have something built. You got to test it, make sure it's accessible. You got to fix some stuff. But I come into the process ideally a lot earlier. I'm all about proactivity in accessibility, specifically in design and content creation. And I work with my customers a lot on design systems and making sure that their design systems are as accessible as possible. And so here we are today. And so what we've got for you is a forum where I'm going to be asking you a number of questions. I've got some polls, but we would love to hear from all of you, right? I think that's one of the wonderful things about UXDX and how they've put this all together, that they really want to hear from the community and hear from your voices. Okay, so grab the mic. We have the lovely Emily, I believe, running around with the microphone. So we've got 35 minutes here. And I also want to just mention, just because the room is really loud, right? And so most people do have headphones. And if you're in the back, there are a couple of seats still up front if you wanted to grab a seat still. So even with the microphone, if you don't mind, it would be really great if you tried to speak into it, because some people have headphones and some people don't. Sound good? OK. So then, we're actually going to start with a poll. Now, in the spirit of inclusive presenting, we have that QR code, but I'm also going to explain the text version. That is the alternative way that you can access the AHA slides. So most of you are aware we're using AHA slides. That's ahaslides.com, then /. And then the keyword here for this room today is capital K, as in koala, capital K, as in koala, capital A as in apple, the number 5, and then the capital Y as in Yukon. OK, because I'm from Canada. So the first poll here, it's a question I'm very interested in hearing from you. What stage do you typically consider accessibility in your process? What stage? So if you're like me, I'm guessing that it's kind of later in the process, right? Maybe dev is doing some testing. Maybe we've got some QA going on, and we're checking out a couple of accessibility things. To the poll. What does it show us? Yeah, it's kind of in line with my gut. From the very beginning, we've got 1.5%. I love it. I'm so glad we've got 1% going there. OK. So then we have a discussion question. And the discussion question is this, which is not showing up here, so I apologize, I have to turn my back. What are some of the biggest challenges that your teams are facing today in applying accessibility in your design systems? So we'd absolutely love to hear from you. Type in some answers if you're going through some challenges in applying accessibility in your design systems. Hold up a hand, hold up a foot if you don't have a hand. Shout, scream, shout if you would like the microphone. I would love to hear from you. Don't say colors, colors, colors. Really? The biggest challenge, colors, colors, colors? It's a pet peeve, personally, right? Because as designers, we're responsible for contrast. And it pisses me off day in and day out that I see digital experiences everywhere, practically, that still have poor contrast. Gray on gray, right? Gray on white. It's really hard to see. That's something that we have to fix. Is there anybody here who has their hand raised, foot raised, shouting? that would like the microphone? It's just a little hard to see up here with the lights, to be honest. We got another one. Budget. Getting people to embrace UX writing that's accessible. Well, that's actually really interesting, right? Because when we talk about content, there's actually a ton in the content space that we can be responsible for. We talk about plain language. Ideally, we're aiming for an 8th grade reading level with all of our writing, but the community at large is asking more for like a 6th grade reading level. And if you consider that plain language in your writing, even your microcopy, man, it's going to make a huge difference because all you're doing is you're simplifying the process with your copy. There's a lot of comments here. Lack of testing with real users. Now, that's a struggle that we have in general, right? It's really hard to find meaningful representation with all of your user groups. But then when you add the accessibility lens, and now we're talking about people with disabilities, and we're actually trying to get their feedback, that brings a whole other level to it, right? And so, yeah, I would highly encourage you to just aim for meaningful representation of your entire user group. Put it that way. That includes people with disabilities. That doesn't include people with disabilities. Like you can cut the swath or the tapestry of humanity in lots of different ways. And so, yeah, we should be including people with disabilities. It's pretty hard to find easy step-by-step instructions to implement accessibility properly. I want to talk about that just for a sec, because it's not a one-size-fits-all, right, when it comes to accessibility. There's just no way. There actually really are a lot of requirements, and it's up to us to take ownership of what those requirements are and to understand at what point in the process we're responsible for implementing each of those requirements. And I will say in the context of a design system, there are different requirements at the different levels of a design system. So I've lost my timer here as well. I don't know if we can get the timer back. But we're going to move on to another question here. It's a poll. So how about this? In which phase have you actually incorporated accessibility? In which phase? I've got a lot of phases up there, right? Starting from like requirements gathering, through the design process, or testing, and even visual QA. So I'm curious to see which phases you guys are having problems with. Okay, so we've got accessibility in the design system. That's great to see. A bit in user research. Persona creation, I'm really glad to see that. Anybody heard of Whitney Queensbury? She talks about the 5 E's of usability, which is the same thing as the Nielsen-Norman group, right? Like the 5 quality attributes, like ease of learning, ease of memorability, efficiency, error tolerance, and enjoyment. So she qualified it as the 5 E's. And she's got this really great Whitney Queensbury about accessible personas. So check that out if you haven't done that before. What is that? Creating mock-ups. We're incorporating accessibility when we're creating mock-ups. That's great. As well as the design system, those seem to be the highest. And then visual QA. Well, if the rest are almost on par across the board, I hope you can appreciate how this feels unbalanced, right? Yes, we should be considering accessibility across the entire process, but the fact that we have a spike for visual QA is no good. We should be doing it a lot earlier. And the fact that we've got a spike at creating mock-ups, and actually design system creation is supposed to be in the middle. So you can see like there would really be a big spike in the middle there. We need to plan for accessibility, right? We need to budget for it. We need to have goals. We need to have requirements. We need to have a definition of done that includes accessibility. And only when we set the team up for success can we actually start the design process, right? So here's another question then. What have you done to ensure that accessibility is a core component of your work? And I didn't make this question up without intent. The word core is actually at the core of the question, right? Like my goal in working with customers is that I want accessibility to just be a thing that you do. is just a natural thing. Just like we now design responsive, and back in the day, like 10 years ago, it was really stressful, right? Trying to make everything go from desktop to mobile. But now we just do it. So it's the same thing as accessibility. Emily, we have a hand here.
We're using the Stark Figma plugin.
Woo!
But I find, even with that, we were actually in delivery on a project at the moment, and we've gotten to the QA stage.
Yeah.
And it's almost like the development team have just ignored some of the stuff that we have at Figma. And yeah, we have to go back, and we've kind of gotten to that stage where we're kind of testing with screen readers as a we're doing the screen reading testing, and it's not working. So even with, sometimes you don't get buy-in even when you try. So it's like, I feel like we'll have to rethink that the next time we're going into delivery, of like how we can really communicate that to the development teams of like, you really need, it's not something that we're just doing, you actually have to do it as well.
Well, yeah, it's one thing for your team
Yeah.
in design to do your work with respect to accessibility, but if all the other stakeholders or participants aren't doing their work, then of course you're going to fail, right? Of course there's going to be issues or bugs. I think what's interesting is the Stark Figma plugin is amazing, by the way, but however, I think the problem with it is that it doesn't cover all of the requirements. There's a gap there as well, and so it's a matter of understanding what your tools are, what they're good at, and what they're not good at, and still trying to fill some of those other gaps. Like one thing a lot of our customers do is we need to also annotate. And in the design space, we annotate anyway, but there are some certain things around interaction and behavior and intent that are really important to document in the design system. So thanks for that. Anyone else wanted to comment on anything? Okay, so we'll go here for a sec. Oh, who brought up the EU legislation? We had a panel on that yesterday. It's helping stakeholders to force them to care. I would agree with that sentiment, but just admittedly, any of the laws that have been implemented in the last, 30 years or so, that is the intent, right? We're forcing organizations to care more about accessibility, but for good reason, right? What we're trying to do is create amazing experiences, true? Okay, but the laws are just helping us to make amazing experiences for everybody. It should be that simple. And that should be our intent, is to make sure that everyone has an amazing time, they can do whatever they want to do, quickly and easily and efficiently, and they just get delight and enjoyment out of it as well. So education and education. There's a couple comments about education. It's key. There's a lot of good courses out there. There's a lot of good training. And I think that it's just like in the design space, the accessibility space is a matter of continuous education. There's always something new to learn. And if you put yourself in your swim lane and you learn as much as possible, accessibility is so diverse, it can be really important to understand somebody else's swim lane with respect to accessibility. So the broader your perspective about other people's responsibilities, you're actually going to be able to collaborate a lot better, in my opinion. Yeah? So Figma, again, trying to get participants with disabilities, again. Talking to dev, again, right? So there's so many parallels between how we work just in design and working with dev as in the accessibility space, right? We need to break down our silos. We need to collaborate. We need to work together, right? So that we wouldn't have this situation where dev, isn't aware, or they don't have the requirements, or whatever the problem was over here, right? If we bring dev up into the design process, and they're included in our design reviews, or actually even before that, I always need to talk to my dev. I need to problem solve with them, because I don't know everything. Sometimes there's dev constraints that I have absolutely no clue about, and so we need to work together. And it's not even just UX and dev, right? Sometimes we need to bring content into the conversation, because we want to make sure that we're templatizing this particular component that has an edit button, but it just says edit. And we can templatize it so that we have context for our screen reader users. Edit what? Oh, edit the product name. So that requires a couple different functions working together. Okay, so moving on, we have another poll. So yes or no? Yes or no? If you can let us know. Have you personally, it disappeared here, sorry. I've personally contributed to the success of my design system. Anybody feel really confident that you've had a strong hand or finger or toe in making that design system accessible? We have a lot of yeses. I'm really glad to see that. I think it would be interesting, too, I didn't have a follow-up on this, but it would be interesting to know what your function is. Design, content, dev, you know. More yeses than nos, and I'm actually really glad to see that. So one more discussion question then. Who should be responsible? Who is responsible for maintaining the accessibility standards within your design system? So does that mean design files? Does that mean like devs coded components in Storybook or whatever? Does that mean your governance and your documentation? I ask you this because I think it's probably all of the above and probably more. Is there anybody that wanted to comment here? We got some everyone's. Not a software engineer. I think that's funny. Yeah, we have a question here. Thanks, Emily.
I'd be really interested to know if anyone else has looked at maybe actually bringing in a corporate legal team. So we're a big corporate, actually using our legal team to start looking at accessibility and almost taking it out of design. As it's a new legal stuff coming in, getting actual legal people to look at it, which puts it more on the map. I don't know if that's something you've looked at or anyone else has looked at. I'd be really keen to learn if they have. But that's something we're looking at, what that could look like right now.
Can I ask you a question? How specifically are you engaging that legal team? Like, are they looking at your design files or
No.
other?
A lot of it, we brought them in initially around all of the new legal stuff coming in, because we were basically trying to justify, we need to do this, because if we don't, we'll get sued.
Yeah.
So we brought them in on that side, and because we then had actual lawyers and our corporate legal team talking, who are very respected, versus us, who aren't, that really helped us. So we're looking at how we can lean on that more and bring them in more. They won't be doing the reviews, we'll be doing all of that, but it will almost be partnering with legal. Now this is legal requirements versus this is just the design team wanting to help people.
What's nice about that, if I may comment, is that it seems like bringing the legal team in this case is you're working more as partners, as opposed to what we hear a lot, because again, I'm in Canada and we do a lot of work in the States, and there's a lot of suing with respect to accessibility. With a lot of our customers, it's legal as mandating. They're being told what to do, as opposed to what it sounds like here, that partnership, that's really the way it should work, right? Is that everybody, again, is responsible for accessibility. Everybody has a role to play. So if we're collaborating and if we're pulling legal in to be a teammate, well, that's actually the best way to go about doing it, right? Because everybody's on board and everybody's working towards the same mission. That's lovely to hear. Thanks for that. Sorry, I just looked. The intern. The intern's responsible. Actually, it's funny because it could be true. I had an intern. It's a great way to bring juniors on board, is to force them to say, hey, you're responsible for making sure that we're documenting all the teeny tiny nitty gritty things. So it's like the grunt work, which juniors are good at, but at the same time, they learn a ton, right? And then like you're growing them and they go off somewhere else and they're gonna bring that passion for accessibility into whatever else they've done. It's actually an excellent way to grow an intern. So anyone involved in the design system, everybody on the product team. It is possible, I do think that everybody has a responsibility, but it's also possible to maybe have one or two people who has the responsibility or is a decision maker with respect to governance, if that makes sense, right? There's some specialties that we kind of need that additional help. So, you know, as in design, it depends, right? But the answer is A, everybody, but sometimes you need some specialty as well. Okay, so we have another poll. How confident are you that your team's output is going to set developers up to do their best work with respect to accessibility? So I'm talking to the creatives and the content people in the room. So how confident are you that whatever you're outputting, the accessibility is totally amazing so that dev can just grab it and run with it and do whatever they got to do? Because to this person's point before, they have their own responsibilities with accessibility, right? They have to code it properly, but we have our responsibilities in the design and content creation space. So how confident are we that we've set dev up for success? Somewhat unsure? Somewhat confident? Okay, I'll take both of those. I'll take both of those. My guess, and I don't want anyone to take this the wrong way, my guess is that you haven't been enabled with understanding the full set of your accessibility responsibilities. That's very commonplace. Now, I'm known in the industry as being very opinionated as to who's responsible for what in the accessibility space. And in addition to that, I don't think that we've enabled the design and content community with understanding just even that full set of requirements, let alone who's responsible for it, okay? So how about another discussion question? If my slides will advance. Okay. What are some of your best practices for documenting accessibility in design systems? And I bring this up because the poll question was just in regards to, are we setting dev up for success? Well, one of the ways that we set dev up for success is by, quote unquote, annotating our designs. And so we might use a tool like the Stark Figma plugin, and it's actually really cool because it can scan your design, and it can say, you know, help you with the focus order, and you can add headings, and here's a landmark, let's throw a skip link in here, that kind of thing. But there's also some comments that you can leave for dev. Whether you're doing so in Figma, whether you're doing that in Confluence, or Jira, or Asana, or whatever you're using, there's just some stuff that can't be conveyed in the visual representation. I mentioned interaction and behavior and that kind of thing. So that's a good example of something where I'd want to annotate it for dev. So we've got annotations in Figma. We've got comments in code. We have a dedicated portal with all the requirements and how to achieve them. So sure, there's what I'm going to call storefronts, like Zero Height and Supernova, Knapsack, right? Those are storefronts, I think, that combine your design files and your dev-coded components and all of your documentation. I will say that if we can document as much as possible at the smallest pieces in the design system, talking components, like even your buttons and your links and whatever. So if we figure everything out as much as possible for these smallest pieces, well then when we get to the larger pieces, when we're using them, there is less guesswork, if you will, right? And so documentation has always been a bit of an issue. Would you agree, between design and dev, just in general? It's like, when I first had to write documentation in Confluence for like Jeep.com, it was a number of years ago, it was horrible. I hated doing it. So now there's a lot of really good tools that we can use, and there's some good ones in the accessibility space. But I think that it's important to remember that the breaking of silos is really important. This is an opportunity to talk to dev. Don't just annotate. If you can, again, talk to dev about what your expectations are, about how this thing is going to work, how it's going to be used. And also keep in mind, with respect to your documentation, if you have a lot of people touching your design system, whether they're actually working on it or whether they're using it to create something else, the more people there are, the more guardrails that you have to set. Like your goal with this design system is so that people can just grab and go. We've figured everything out with respect to that design system. So you just grab it, and there's a little bit of guidance about how you can use it. That should include some accessibility considerations. Just looking to see if anyone's raising a hand, a toe, a finger. Okay. So we have one more poll here and one last discussion question. How confident are you with respect to this statement? My organization has accessibility metrics that map to business metrics. Like, you could even ask yourself, my organization has usability metrics that map to business metrics, and do you have accessibility metrics that map to your usability metrics that map to your business metrics? Oh, 93% says no. I'm shocked at that number, but I was kind of guessing it would be really high like that. Yeah. The reason I asked that is because I wanted to ask a different question that's kind of in line. So here's our last discussion question. What have you done, or what have your teams done to actually try to measure the effectiveness of whatever your accessibility initiatives are? Now, it's in the context of design systems, but that's okay. It doesn't have to be in the context of design systems. But what are you actively doing right now to measure the success of your accessibility initiatives? Anybody? Nout? How do I even pronounce that? Nout? Nothing? We perform assessments on our solutions. Okay, that's excellent, right? So again, I mentioned my company. We do manual evaluations on digital properties. There's a bunch of accessibility-focused companies that do. That's actually really important. And with the EAA, the European Accessibility Act that's coming in, and I'm guessing most of you are beholden to that act, like it's something that you're going to have to do. You have to test your digital properties. And with the EAA, any product or service that a consumer would interface with. So that includes hardware. So kiosks and point-of-sale terminals, right? So you have to take a look at your portfolio and say, okay, what have we got? What does the EAA apply to? And we need to test this stuff. We need to find what issues there are. We need to make a roadmap on how we're going to execute on it. But that's just one way of measuring your effectiveness, right? You probably are going to have to start reporting on how well your organization is doing with respect to accessibility. And you have to have a roadmap on how you're going to start to improve. So these are some of the things that the EAA is asking of you. So if you don't know how to measure right now, testing is definitely one way to go about doing it. But the key is kind of in the framing of the question that I proposed to you. Maybe I'll rephrase just for a second. We can get a raise of hands or toes or whatnot. But who has usability metrics that are tied to business metrics? Does anybody? I don't see any hands. No. Okay, so maybe start there, because in my experience, I've worked with customers in doing that first. You want to make sure that you're showing ROI on usability, and it ties to whatever your business is, what's important to the business, right? And so start with usability, because we just have more traction, I find, in the design space by getting people to understand the usability issues. It's been around a lot longer than accessibility is the reason why I'm pushing that. And then what you can try to do is tie some accessibility metrics to your usability metrics. They're not that different, right? If you can show, hey, we found this accessibility bug, for instance, contrast, and we fixed it, and now as a result, we're not seeing the same number of people, like with a heat map or something, focusing on this particular widget. Because we inferred that the time that they're spent focusing on that widget is because the contrast is so low. Because we fixed the contrast, now we've freed up their time. So like you can do quantitative research on time on task and that kind of thing. So all of the like typical usability research, you can start to apply to accessibility problems, and you can prove your cases as to the effort that you're putting in has significant value. Cool? Okay, I'm seeing Lighthouse, I'm seeing DevTools. Those are all really great. It's all about testing. Did we see, yeah, we have a hand here. Probably the last comment before I think we have to close. Yeah?
I just had a question around usability metrics and tying them to business metrics. At least in our enterprise organizations, sometimes they're like really far-fetched, abstract goals. I guess it would be great to get some examples from you just around like usability metrics, and how do you tie those to those kind of like more overarching enterprise business metrics that we might be receiving as a team?
That's a really good question, and I think, I'm going to be totally honest, I think that it would be better suited for one of our myriad of research professionals, just because they spend more time there, and I spend more time in the accessibility space, not the usability space these days. I apologize for not answering, but I want to be honest with you that I think.
Of course. No, I appreciate that. But maybe from an accessibility perspective then, just like, do you have an example of a metric that you personally use, I guess, in your work when you're tracking like metrics?
Okay, well that's a good question. So like we are software as a service, so we have a platform where our customers, we track all of their accessibility endeavors. So all their digital properties and like all of the bugs that they have and remediation, all that stuff. So we have our own software. And so the things for us that are important are very similar to the last speaker on the other stage. It's enterprise, it's platform, and what's important to them is efficiency in executing on these bugs that they have. So how quickly can we get them to understand what the issues just even are? Because if you do a manual evaluation, you've got like 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 bugs sometimes. How do you find the themes? So if we can help our customers find themes and then start to execute on that, that for them ties into efficiency just even on their own side, right? So we're looking at, I'm not articulating this well, but we're looking at helping them identify issues and then actually tying it to their own business metrics too, because if they have success in their outcomes, then we're having success in our outcomes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah?
Thank you.
Okay, I hope so. Okay, so this is great. So thanks, everybody. Again, my name is Karen Hawkins. I'm going to pull Catherine back up here, but thanks again. If you have any accessibility questions, I'll be around. Right, nice to meet you.